Yeah.
No kidding.
Okay, Brent is back. Welcome back, Brent.
Hi again.
Round
It's
two.
Sorry about that
3:30
earlier. I
now.
must have clicked on something wrong. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, that wasn't a problem. So Jennifer, I'll let you know when I hit 3:40 and we'll start it there.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, that's 3:40. Take it away, Jennifer.
You got it. Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, Brent, we'd like to thank you for taking the time to interview with the council today. Under normal circumstances, the State Council would be the ones asking all of these questions. But since we're doing this virtual and have a pretty tight time frame, Gary has asked that I ask all the questions. But I'd like to take a moment to introduce our council members to you.
Sure.
They're going to raise their hand as I call their name.
Okay.
So first is Council President Gabe Johnson. Alderman Dave Pritchett, who's the chair of our Personnel and Finance Committee. Alderman Kelly Bevins, who's the chair of our Safety and Public Works Committee. Alderman Tad Erickson. Alderman Jan Lambert. Alderman Kevin Stunick. Mayor Dave Bedeau. We also have our council member-elect members who are joining us, and that is Council Member-elect Mike O'Day and Council Member-elect Tiffany Stenglein. Unfortunately, Alderman Wayne Erickson is not able to join us, and I'm Jennifer Bergman. I'm the city administrator. So we've scheduled 35 minutes for this interview, and we have 13 prepared questions for you. So just asking that you please be mindful of the time. And so lose track of time, I have set an alarm when we have 5 minutes left. So just want to thank you for your patience and your cooperation during these virtual interviews.
Absolutely.
So I am going to start us off with the first question. Please tell us what interests you about this position and highlight key qualifications that make you the best person for the job.
Sure. Well, let's go back to the beginning. I guess what really interests me is I actually am from Brainerd. So I grew up in Brainerd. I recognize a few names coincidentally, and grew up there, went to Garfield Elementary School in the Northeast Side. Just a little bit about me. I can still say I went to the junior high schools, Franklin and Washington, and of course, graduated from high school there. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree from St. Cloud State University. My master's degree is in public safety executive leadership. From there, actually, my first job was over in Crosby. I started with the Crosby Police Department and was a DARE officer along with a patrol officer. And then from there, I went to the St. Cloud Police Department. And I moved up the ranks there a little bit, where I was a patrol officer. I was moved into the investigative division relatively quickly when I started there. Working in the schools, I was an SRO, or a liaison officer, for 4 years, and then an investigator, and then got promoted. And I was also a crime scene analyst for 6 years. And what that provided me is an opportunity to attend the FBI Academy on about 8 different occasions at their invite for forensic training with people from all over the world. So I've been out there many times, but I've also graduated from their National Academy, which is a 3-month command course. In addition, I've been through the National Fire Academy, their arson investigation course, and also the Southern Police Institute for Homicide School down in Louisville, Kentucky. So I've had some excellent training, just to name a few things, I suppose. And that, combined with the opportunity I received 14 years ago and being appointed the police chief down in the city of Becker. So since I've been here, of course, I've been the police chief / emergency management director, and I've kind of, with a small town, you kind of do it all, I guess. But, budgeting, supervision, handling major events and that sort of thing, such as they are here. So I guess that's a little bit about me and about what I've, I guess, accomplished or done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Please describe your leadership and management style and the strategies you would use to manage staff in the department.
Well, leadership and management are two different things. And I've always looked at as, management is more of a control thing. And I look at that as like a budget. It's kind of falls on me to manage a budget, look at a budget, certainly work with others, but it kind of falls on me. Whereas the leadership, it's getting others or inspiring others to be motivated to kind of get the things done that we need to get done. Doesn't necessarily have to be me. How you get that done is, what I've, kind of incorporated here. And when I started here, there were they almost got rid of the police department a couple years before I got here, just because of a lot of integrity issues. And not to say anything bad, but that's just where they were at the time. And they needed somebody to come in and be that boss to get things back on track. And not to be the patrol officer necessarily anymore, but to come in and run the day-to-day operations. So really what happened was to get to know the staff, and not only with the police department, but the staff elsewhere in the city and how things operate. And certainly if I were to come into Brainerd, that would be part of that. I'd want to get to know the other key people or leadership staff members of the city, certainly the fire department, or certain organizations as well. I think it's important to be observed, be seen, and be visible, not only to the public, because I know there's going to be a lot of uncertainty when the new chief comes in, as what's he like, what's he do, and what's he all about. So I think it's important that they get out and communicate and just set an example for the rest of the staff that I'm the type of guy that I'm not afraid to go out and talk to people and see what's going on, at least to get kind of an idea of what's going on and to answer those questions. And they're not always going to be easy, but I think it's important. And in addition, internally, I think it's important that the same thing kind of occur. I think as the new chief, you have to come in and get to know your people before, trying to come in and make all these changes is not necessarily going to work day one. And we know that, but I think they always think that's what's going to happen. So I think just to put people at ease, come in and talk a little bit and see what things work. Maybe there's some that don't, I don't know, but at least get an opportunity to talk to them and put things at ease a little bit. That would be my strategy.
Thank you. Please describe your experience related to community policing and how you would bring that to the city of Brainerd.
Well, when I got here, we had none. And I guess I'll use Becker as the example. The police department, because of the position it was in, really didn't have anything. And that was unfortunate, but it is what it is. And at that time, and recognizing the change that had to be made at that point is, again, trying to get out and talk to groups. And what happens and what has happened is the ability to get out and talk to these groups has opened up opportunities for us to talk to them, to get in front of their people, if you will. So there's the groups out here, I will say, like highlighting some of our church groups, coming in and talking about ALICE training, active shooter training, and stuff like that is a good example. I just did one of those for one of our churches here not long ago. But getting out and creating those relationships and partnerships has opened some of that up. In addition to getting to know the businesses, we've made it a point at least to get around to talk to the businesses, probably more so now, just to put them at ease a little bit, those that are still open. And just, again, keep that dialogue open with them and the city, because we tend to be the most visible part of the city oftentimes because we're out in a squad car and people see us. So automatically we get asked questions about what's going on. So being approachable, I think is a key. Attending events is a key. Creating programs that we feel are necessary to at least reach people, whatever those might be, or whatever we feel we're missing, would be a conversation I think that would have to be had with the council and maybe leadership people. Where are we deficient? What do we need to shore up, or what can we create, or what have you? And certainly within the confines of the budget and that sort of thing. So I think it's important. I've done that here. We've got, I would venture to say, probably the highest level of support we have ever had. I'm very pleased with that. That's been one of my goals all along, is to have a lot of support here, and we have it. So I'm very happy with that. So my plan would be to be able to bring something like that, or that idea, that drive to the city of Brainerd.
Thanks.
Yep.
Or what have you done to further your knowledge and understanding about diversity in a community, and how have you demonstrated your knowledge?
Becker's interesting, when you compare it to other cities, and I would say we're about 99% white. So trying to get out and deal with that here for my officers, as much as to be visible with how we're dealing with it, that's been difficult just because of the makeup of our city. We did have some protesters at one point, about 20 of them. It's important that people see that we are willing to talk, and the best example I guess I would have related to what we've had here is I got out and talked to him one day, which to some was not very popular because it looks like I'm positioning myself, but at the same time, I think it's important that people see that we're not afraid to confront what we have to. And I think we do have to. So the other part is that judging or looking at what we've had occurring before it occurs, maybe here in Becker, what I did is I asked for a workshop, or what we call here an executive meeting, with my council, just to make sure that we're all on the right page or the same page and on the right track. And in this case, it was the city of Big Lake, which is down the road, had a demonstration that kind of went haywire a little bit. And so thinking that we might get something here, how do we want to address it if it happens here? So the idea being is, let's talk about it. Let's make sure we're on the same page, so people aren't running for the hills when these things do happen, but yet we're all, on the same page dealing with it or addressing it or talking about it in the same manner. So if the police department does have to respond in a particular way, it's approved by the council, or they understand maybe the direction that we might head to ahead of time. A big part of that, obviously, is we need to communicate with the people that are involved. If you can ahead of time, that's what you want to do. We've also been able, I was part of some of the meetings with the state that they're having with DPS, virtually, predominantly, they were virtual, but in addition, watching what's happening around us, not only Big Lake, but St. Cloud. Since we're close to St. Cloud, there's been a lot of things that have gone on there as well. So keeping in communication with my fellow chiefs to see if they've needed something, we certainly would offer that up as well. So trying to keep up on it as best we can, at least from the position we're at in the city of Becker.
Thank you. Can you describe a time when you made a mistake at work? How did you deal with the situation, and what was the outcome?
Well, there's always things you can do better, isn't there? And I guess a particular instance, I'll go back to this, and thankfully it wasn't a real big thing, but it makes you learn really quick. Let's put it that way. Some of you may be aware that Becker experienced a large fire here back in February at a recycling plant that made national news. And fortunately or unfortunately, I get thrown into the mix as the police chief. And in this case, the fire chief was busy. He was fighting the fire, and his staff as well. So we needed somebody to really kind of address the media. And one thing I learned, and I don't know if I call it much of a mistake versus kind of a learning experience of how media actually deals with things, or maybe can kind of twist things. I guess I would say I'm better prepared next time on how we're maybe going to deal with the media out of Minneapolis. There was one instance where they took something I said, which is this long, if you will, and made it like this. And it changed the whole context of what was being said. And of course, as you can imagine, Facebook lit up, and I got called a lot of names and stuff like that, but it was taken in the wrong context. And I guess a mistake, maybe not giving them the credit that I think we all probably know on how things can go with the media very quickly. And so that, I guess, was a learning experience for me, certainly for our staff, city-wise, and how that was done or whatnot. But I wouldn't call it necessarily a bad thing, but it's certainly something that we learned from very quickly, and how we maybe address it the next time.
Thank you. Describe an experience where you've had to respond to and resolve a difficult and sensitive community member inquiry or complaint.
I would say this, we do this quite often, depending, I live in a community that's got a golf course, and I kind of come walking into a community where there's I would say a level of entitlement. There's people that have been here a long time, and I'm an outsider, if you will, coming in. So that's been a challenge to deal with, and in some cases, and whether it be a council member who's gotten in trouble in the past, I've been called a liar in a council meeting by a former mayor. That ultimately resulted in a censure to the mayor, and a whole story there, I would have to tell you. But he actually was censured twice, and it was very sensitive in the sense that it was very public. It was a situation. There were a number of situations where I have to admit you didn't know what side of the fence you'd be on when you walked into a council meeting, including the other council members. And it was difficult. But for us, it was a matter of how is this being dealt with and communicated to the public. And we stood our ground, if you will, in that we got to get information out relative to the discussions that are being had. So that way people understand the position, like in my case, the position that I was in. He ultimately had to apologize per the city attorney, that sort of thing. And it was, I would say, sensitive just due to the nature of who was involved. And that unfortunately came up several times, and we worked through it. It certainly was in the newspaper just about every week, something happening with our city council at the time. And things are different now. We've got a very stable and solid city council, I would say, and much better. So I would call that a very sensitive type of scenario that we've dealt with. Certainly we deal with many every day, by virtue of data practice or something like that. But that's the one that comes to mind, I guess, right now.
Thank you.
Sure.
Describe any partnerships you have been a part of creating. How did building these types of relationships benefit the community and the organization you work for?
Great question. A couple of the things that I've had and I will say the privilege of being a part of right from the very beginning. We've got two particular groups come to mind. One is our Beyond the Yellow Ribbon group here in Becker. I'm not a veteran myself, but I was asked to be a part of the initial group to start this, and from the law enforcement side of things. So I've been part of that. So part of that also included us who didn't require us, but we chose to kind of move forward with carrying cards and stuff like that. So when we do deal with veterans, who can they deal with or communicate with if they need services and that sort of thing? And I know that's probably something most of those groups do, but that's one of the things that we've done here, and I've been a part of that. And it was great. Is great. The other group is what we call TRACK. That is a group that we created years ago. It's called TRACK for Together Reaching Area Kids. I'm a founding member of this group, in which we had some suicides, unfortunately, from our kids in our high school. We had 3 of them within a year and a half. And as a result of that, we put together a group of community members on how we want to try and address this in a better way from a community standpoint. So it's been the city, it's been the schools. We've had some we've got some social workers, some probation people. Really, we run the gamut on people that actually participate in this group, and it's been very good. We've been able to bring in some speakers to the schools for not only the kids, but also for the staff on addressing, mental health concerns and that thing. So those are 2 of them that come to mind that I've been a part of, and they've really helped us because one, for me, I get in front of other people. I don't get an opportunity, unfortunately, to mix with the school people here in Becker because the school officers are actually from the sheriff's office, not from the police department. That was in place before my time here, but so that gives me an opportunity to mix with them a little bit and to talk with some of the other partners as well, and certainly to participate. We've been involved in a kind of a vendor show, if you want to call it that, before one of the speakers. So we were there. We had a table, that sort of thing. And certainly on the veteran side of things with Beyond the Yellow Ribbon, it just kind of mixes well with law enforcement and our contact potentially with other veterans. So that's gone very well as well.
Thanks.
Sure.
Describe a situation that you feel demonstrates your integrity and your ethical standards.
Sure. Well, thankfully for me, I have an opportunity to get up front and center all the time in front of our community. And again, I would say we've had several instances this year. Kind of hasn't everybody, but this year we had a major fire, which followed by the pandemic, which followed for us the civil unrest, and then we had a major political campaign visit here by one of the Trump boys in the city of Becker, which created chaos, but such as it is, it's a matter of planning and getting out in front of it. And thankfully, in one way, I'm in front of a lot of this as the emergency manager as well. So it creates opportunities for me to communicate not only with the city council, but also with our public. And the more interesting part is when COVID first started, I was the communicator to our little region around Becker, which was the city staff, other community members, including businesses in the school. I'd participate in meetings with our emergency management team down at the county, and then basically transfer the information back here as best we could. So I was kind of the go-to person, if you will, in that respect. But in the other ones, it's a matter of communicating, not only again to our city staff and council, but to the community as well. So my name tends to be kind of attached to a lot of things as a result of that. And I think people have come to, my 14 years here have come to really know me and respect me. And I'm not known as Brent, I'm still known as Chief. I don't know why, but that's just how it is. So it's been great.
Thanks. Just to touch base on time, we got about questions left in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
if you are hired for this position and are still with the organization 5 years from now, how do you think the department will be different?
Well, there's some things to look at, hiring and retention. I know there's a, like my department, very young department, and I would like to see the department with some veterans, if you will, people not leaving, so hopefully we can keep people there. Certainly the context of what happens in the outside world is going to change, and we'll probably be a little more active in that respect, whether it be related to police reforms, whatever those still could look like, with community groups and that sort of thing. So I hope we're a very active participant with those. In addition, I guess to, and I'm sure Corky's already got his people out and about quite a bit, but continuing to do what he's already doing, attending events, being very visible and observable to build confidence and trust.
Thanks. And kind of a nice segue. Can you describe your techniques relating to retention of law enforcement personnel?
Yeah, so what we do here in Becker is, just because we're a smaller department, we tend to be a training ground. And what we've done is we've started a reserve program several years ago to try and get people, primarily students, interested in law enforcement to come in and be kind of an extra pair of hands and eyes for our department. And we've actually worked through St. Cloud State University, Hennepin Tech. Those two programs, we've got a couple from Alex Tech that have helped us. So I think we need to be active in going to these places where the students are coming to try and sell what we have and why it's great to come to Becker, why it would be great to come to the Brainerd Lakes area. Everybody knows about that. It'd be hard for me to compete against you guys, but nonetheless, I think we need to tell people all the good things about our department, and we've done that by going to these particular things. In addition, I've got one of these, which is, you can go online and actually see it as well. It's the Becker Police Department Annual Report. I know not every department does that, but it puts information in the hands of the person on the web, if you will, where it's at on our website, to be able to see what we are involved in and what we do.
Thanks. If you could go back to when you were first thinking about police work as a career, what advice would you give yourself?
Never in a million years did I think I'd be a police chief. When I first started, I thought I was going to stay as just a regular officer, but it took me some time to do the educational piece, and I would probably do more with that and quicker and earlier. But I'm proud of what I've been able to accomplish, starting in Crosby, going to St. Cloud and being able to do the things that I've done there, the people I've been able to interact with, and of course in Becker's been outstanding to deal with, and the people I work with. There's not a lot I would tell myself or the younger self of me to change. Sometimes it's being in the right place at the right time, and I think in a lot of cases or a lot of instances for me, it really has been. And certainly not turning down opportunities for experience. St. Cloud was a good example of that when I was there. So just recognizing those and continue to recognize those and jump on opportunities as they exist.
Thanks. And why should the Brainerd City Council select you as their next police chief?
Well, I didn't think this opportunity was ever going to come up in the latter stages, if you even want to call it that, of my career. I've got a lot of energy left, and I want to stick around for a while. And so when I saw the opportunity and Corky was retiring, I was a little surprised, but yet I'm very excited. And the reason I kind of say that, I still come up there quite a bit. My parents live just south of Breezy Point. I have a brother that lives just north of town. I still know quite a few people. Interestingly, I got some text messages today when I got in the newspaper. So for me to be able to return where kind of I first started and grew up is exciting. There's a lot of familiarity with the area. I still know a lot of people in the area. I know probably every chief of police in some manner in the county, state patrol as well. So I still know a lot of people up there, thankfully. And for me, it'd be a great opportunity, obviously, and a great transition from a smaller department, certainly up to a bigger department. I think I've got a lot to offer with the experiences I've had with a bigger department, certainly now at the level that I'm at right now as a chief of police, but certainly I think those experiences I can bring to Brainerd as well.
Thanks, Brenton. And with the about 5-ish minutes left, do you have questions of us?
Well, not to ask a tough one, as you've been asking me, I would say this, let me ask the council this, but from a council perspective, what do you see might be the issues that the department should probably address in the near future? And, that maybe that are just kind of coming up. But in addition to that, what about internal as well? And maybe there aren't any, and I understand that. I've known Corky for a long time and I've watched from afar and I know he's done a great job. So certainly not a loaded question by any means, but just kind of curious of perspective.
Yeah, Brent, I think the short term is also a long-term problem, and that's just recruitment and retention.
Yeah.
We're a few officers short of where we're budgeted and where we want to be, and we have been for a couple of years, and we'd like to be fully staffed, and we'd like to, after we get them trained up, we'd like to keep them here. So
Understand.
That's what I view our biggest problem as. Does anyone, Jan, you want to add anything, Kevin?
I would echo the same thing, Gabe and Brent. Retention, and let's keep moving the department forward. Corky's done a great job, but we need to continue that forward.
Very good.
Yeah, and I agree with both of them. And I feel some of the programs we have, it would be nice to enhance them, or at least continue them. But we could always enhance them. We do have a great police department, so
You bet.
thanks.
Very good.
Any more questions of us, Brent?
None at this time. I appreciate it. And, you talk about retention. That's certainly one of our issues as well. Like I say, as a small department, we tend to be that training ground. And certainly with the pay, it's tough nowadays when you've got the Rosevilles of the world that are offering a $5,000 bonus. So we do the best we can. We've been very fortunate. We have zero drama here. Everybody gets along. So that's what I envision up there is a great group of people to work with. And I talked with Mike Bestel a couple of weeks ago, and he and I are high school classmates. And, so I look forward to the opportunity if it presents itself. And I know you got a tough decision ahead of you, and you got some good candidates. So I wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you. Do you have any final thing you want to say or a closing statement?
I would just say this. Again, I grew up in Brainerd. I look forward to the opportunity, hopefully, to return and to bring my skill set back to further where you're at. Certainly, like we've said, Corky's done a great job. He really has, and I think it's important just to move that forward in another way, if that's what it is. Like I've always said, the person who replaces me here is going to come in and make changes, and I have to be okay with that. As the outgoing chief, that's okay. That's expected. And just want to make it better, and that's all I'm after. I have a lot of fondness for the city of Brainerd because I've spent a lot of time up there. And I know this is a big decision for you. So I would encourage you to look at my annual report. It certainly says a lot about me and our department. You get the opportunity, and I appreciate your time today. And again, if any questions were to come up beyond this, don't hesitate to reach out to me as well.
Okay, thank you, Brent. And thanks for taking the time to interview for the position.
Absolutely. Again, I look forward to talking to you further.
All right, thank you. So that puts us at 4:08. The next candidate will be showing up at 4:15. So we're going to take a 6-minute break.
Hey, Dave Bordeaux. It's Jan. Got a question for you. You remember when I asked about what's important? Oh, I'm sorry. Important thing, important task. Your number doesn't start 606, does it? Your phone number?
No,
Your cell phone?
no.
Ah, I got scammed. Somebody got into my email then.
Oh, that's what the important thing
It
was.
could
It
still
wasn't for
be
me.
Mayor Bedeau just with a burner phone, so you never know what he's running on the side.
We've
If I was
gotten them
asking
at,
you for answers, yes.
we've gotten them at City Hall saying the mayor wants you to write him a check right away.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah. And you know what? And I called them and they had the audacity to hang up on me. So. Thank you.
A lot of times that's just a bot, a robot that just kind of sends out like emails, and then
Yeah,
you
you
can
called the
respond
number
to
to
them.
let-
And
You called the number and then you let them know you're a mark and you'll do what an email says now. So you're going to get further solicitations.
Yeah, I know.
depends on the scam. Like some of those where they say they need a check, you can sit there and play with them online for I'll send you this whatever, and they say no, I would like a check, and it's like, oh wait, here, I'll stop over at your house. No,
Mhm.
I know. I got my first Social Security scam today. So interesting.
Okay, it's 4:15. So we'll welcome Chad.
Oh, thank
Jennifer,
you.
take it away.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. Again, as Council President Johnson said, we'd like to thank you for taking the time today to interview with the City Council. Under normal circumstances, the City Council would be the ones asking the question, but because we're doing this virtually and we have a pretty tight time frame, Gary has asked that I ask the questions. But before we get into that, I would like to take a moment to introduce our City Council members so you know who they are.
Okay.
First, Council President Gabe Johnson, Alderman Dave Pritchett, who is the chair of our Personnel and Finance Committee, Alderman Kelly Bevins, who is the chair of our Safety and Public Works Committee, Alderman Tad Erickson, Alderwoman Jan Lambert, Alderman Kevin Stunick, Mayor Dave Bedeau, and then we also have our council member elects, Councilmember-elect Mike O'Day, and Councilmember-elect Tiffany Stengel. Absent from our group is Alderman Wayne Erickson. He had a conflict. So, and I'm Jennifer Bergman. I'm the city administrator.
Okay, thank you.
So we've scheduled 35 minutes for this interview and we have 13 prepared questions for you. So just asking you to please be mindful of the time. And so I don't lose track of time. I have set an alarm when we have 5 minutes left and I'll let you know. So
Okay.
thank you for your patience and your cooperation with these virtual interviews. And I will kick us off with the first question. If you could please tell us what interests you about this position and highlight key qualifications that make you the best person for the job.
Sure. What interests me about this position is that it's really kind of a sweet spot in my career because I'm kind of a good age for this position because it lands me in that spot where it would be a great position to finish out my career, time-wise and things like that too. And it's really it's a good sized city and a good combination of what the city was looking for in the original posting. And I'm being somebody who grew up not extremely far from there and being from the Lakes Country and kind of the tourist and hospitality country and things like that, that appeals to me as well. And life changes sometimes and it ebbs and it flows, and it's probably a super, like I said, it's probably a super sweet spot in my career for me to land in a place like this.
Thank you. Could you please describe your leadership and management style and the strategies you would use to manage staff in the department?
Sure. My leadership style, I really kind of bring it down to three things: is trust and accountability and professionalism. Because if the community or stakeholders or something like that doesn't have trust in the police department or the police chief or its membership, we're not going to get far. We really aren't, and we're fighting uphill battles all the time. The accountability piece, that's kind of the self accountability and accountability as an agency. Because if we take that ownership for what we do on a day-to-day basis, and if we can we can always go back and say, yes, this is what we did, and this is how we're accountable for our actions and what we do out there when we deal with people and we deal with our stakeholders. It's going to help us out a little bit. And the last part about it is professionalism. And I wouldn't ever want anybody to question the professionalism of the agency or its membership or anything like that, because we're really, as public employees and elected officials, we're really a representation of the community. And so if we can't act professionally, we kind of go back to that where we don't have the trust of the community. So how does that all roll together in a management style? It rolls together where you invest in your membership and you go out there and you model the way and you show people the right way to do things. And then it's a lot easier to bring that all together. And then we look a lot better with the public in our relationships too.
Thank you. Please describe your experience related to community policing and how would you bring that to the city of Brainerd?
Sure. I do have a lot of experience in community policing that goes back a number of years. I was formerly assigned as a multi-housing officer and a crime prevention officer. And so I dealt with rental properties and their owners. And in a former agency that I worked in, I started a program and we called it ROMA, and it stood for Responsible Owners and Managers Association. What we would do is we would bring tenants and managers and owners together once a month for a potluck lunch at the police department. And that was a good example of community policing back then. And later in my career, I was a school resource officer. So it was like I was the police chief of an 1,800 person city on a day-to-day basis. And one of my good examples of that is I got into classrooms all the time, and it didn't matter what department it was, science or language arts or social studies or anything like that. And I would take a class and talk to the kids or driver's ed or anything like that. And I've had some of those people come up to me years later and say, yeah, I remember when you were the school resource officer. So, I didn't necessarily remember those kids, but maybe it made a little bit of a difference, and it was maybe a chance at a good example of community policing, how we tied in. More recently, I've done things, we do a shop with a cop and coffee with a cop and fishing with a cop and badges for baseball and things like that too in my current agency. Attend some birthday parties and different activities like that in community policing. What would I do to bring it to Brainerd? Try to get the people in the agency out into the community, because I wouldn't want police officers to only be represented by the squad car going by somebody's house or by a business owner's window or anything like that. In getting out and with the civic groups and getting out and interacting with the community and still participating in some of the current programs is how I would do that.
Thank you. What have you done to further your knowledge and understanding about diversity in a community, and how have you demonstrated your knowledge?
Sure. What I've done to further it, I work in an urban environment right now, and both in Minneapolis and St. Paul at Metro Transit Police Department. So we constantly, on a day-to-day basis, deal with an extremely diverse community. And what we do with that community is kind of a lot what I just said in the last question is we do try to get out there and participate in some of those programs. In Shop with the Cop is one of those that always comes up with, we couldn't do it this year, unfortunately, because of the world health crisis, but we would always do that. And that brings in a very diverse crowd, and it brings in the officers too. And it's a good chance to interact with people. And so I'm quite well versed in that and in my everyday operations.
Thank you. Can you describe a time when you made a mistake at work? How did you deal with the situation and what was the outcome?
Sure. I've made some mistakes in my career, obviously, and one that I think of was a time when I probably, this was a number of years ago, I got into a verbal disagreement with a coworker, and it came down to when I was field training a recruit officer, and it was a personal dispute between he and I. And what I did by making that mistake is I let it go way too far. And I let this verbal discussion escalate, and probably some not so smart things were said back and forth between us. And it takes that time sometimes when you really just have to kind of let your breath out, relax, and say, all right, let's take a little bit of a cool down period, and then let's talk this over and see how we can solve this so it doesn't happen again in the future. And it never did. It was not a problem in the future. It didn't seem to be a long lasting or lingering thing either, but it was a mistake I made for sure.
Thank you. Can you describe an experience where you've had to respond to and resolve a difficult and sensitive community member inquiry or complaint?
Sure, I can think of one of those fairly recently. We had a situation at when I was working a few months ago where a couple officers of ours who were working on our team had to escort a person off of one of our trains in St. Paul. And what happened was they ended up escorting this person off the train by taking this party by both arms and moving him off the train because he was being disruptive and needed to be removed. And what happened is that a passerby had taken the time to stop, and then he didn't think that was right, that the person needed to be removed from the train. He wasn't on the train previously or anything. He just happened to be standing there. And he called and complained about the officers and their actions and what they did. And what I did with him was try to explain and try to understand that sometimes we perceive things differently than other folks do. When we see it through our mind's eye, or when we see it through a different lens, so to speak, we see things differently. So what I did was I tried to talk him through the situation, tried to talk him through what led us up to that situation. And I kind of, I explained to him that it was caught on body camera, and it was also caught on the video cameras on the train and on the train station too, and invited him to come in and take a look at any of that footage that he wanted to. Unfortunately, he never did. He didn't follow up on it, and that happens sometimes too. But that was kind of my way of solving that community crisis that could have really erupted.
Thank you. Can you describe any partnerships you've been a part of creating? How did you build these types of relationships that benefited the community or organization you worked for?
Sure. One of the partnerships that I was a participant in, I certainly won't say that I did everything by myself, but what I did a number of years ago and participated in was a creation of a drug and violent offender task force. And that was a multi-county task force that we created, and it took at least 4 or 5 different law enforcement agencies, and it ebbed and flowed a little bit depending on who was participating. But we brought all of those counties and or police departments together to pool some resources because we had a lot of community complaints about narcotics and some violent crime in all of our counties. And we decided, how could we further this and pool our resources, so to speak. So that was one of those, and it still exists today, to my knowledge, and it was something that we brought up really from ground zero to kind of take a look at some things that were of concern by the community.
Thanks. Can you describe a situation that you feel demonstrates your integrity and your ethical standards?
Yes, I can. About 5 years ago, I formerly worked for the sheriff's office in Chisago County, and we had that summer prior to that, we had gone through a hiring process for the position of deputy sheriff. And I was the chief deputy at the time. And at the end of this employment process, when the sheriff had housed all the scores and had tallied all the scores and everything like that, he made the announcement that he was hiring his son as a deputy. We operated under 2 sets of policy. Of course, we had county policy and sheriff's office policy, both of which stated that no family members could work for the sheriff's office. And so naturally that was brought up by people within our agency, and I had questions about it myself. And my integrity and ethics were certainly tested, because being in the position that I was in, I felt it was my responsibility to bring it to the sheriff and say, are you going to do this, Sheriff? Are you really going to follow through with hiring your son? Because, you know, it is against policy, and did we think about a few different things that could come of this? What ultimately happened might be the question. What ultimately happened was he did hire his son, and he told me that I had 2 choices. I would either quit or I would be fired. So that's certainly professionally the biggest test of ethics and integrity that I've ever faced in my career.
Thank you.
Yes.
If you are hired for this position and still with the organization 5 years from now, how do you think the department will be different?
I think the department will be different because the face of policing is changing. In my 22 years in this career, it's a lot different than it was when I first began and when I first started. And even within the past 1 to 4 or 5 years, it's really changed. And what I think that we're moving to in policing and how it's going to be different is that we really have to work on those 6 pillars of 21st century policing that were developed a few years ago. And we really, what it comes down to is that we have to concentrate and always be mindful of how important the community is to us as far as partnerships go. And we need to really invest in that trust factor with the community. When I first started in policing, it was not as much of a concern, so to speak, what level of trust the community had in the police department, or how legitimate the community viewed the police department or its membership. And I really see that changing over the next number of years too. And one of the other things that I really see changing is that we're going to concentrate more on training officers. And that's kind of accomplished through technology, and it's a lot better than it has been. But we're going to focus on that and focus on officer wellness too. That's really been brought to the forefront, is how are we doing on the inside? We're not ironclad soldiers who just are heartless and have no feelings or anything like that. So that's how policing I really do see will change too, is that we focus on a few more of those things better than we have in the past.
Thanks. And kind of maybe along those lines, can you discuss your philosophy and techniques relating to retention of law enforcement personnel?
Sure, and that's always going to be a concern is retention. People are lured away for different reasons, and my philosophy on it is if people like their job and they really enjoy coming to work every day and every shift, your retention is going to be a lot better. So let's make it a pleasant place to work. It's not always necessarily driven by dollars or benefits or anything like that. But if we're the best trained law enforcement agency with the best people available, and people see that, and people start to spread the word, and that word gets around, and then all of a sudden you're a desirable agency for which that you're working for. And people see that and they want to be there. That's what you have to do, is kind of create that. That's my philosophy, is try to create that place where people aren't seen as numbers, or people aren't seen as simply a resource or something like that. They're backed by their peers and partners and administrators, and that goes citywide, and the community as well too. So that's part of that community investment that I would concentrate on in addition to that.
Thank you. If you could go back to when you were first thinking about police work as a career, what advice would you give yourself?
The advice that I would give myself is, don't worry about things that you can't control, because there are a lot of things in this life and in this world that we want to constantly control, and we want to always have our fingers in something and be able to move the chess pieces, so to speak. But I would look back on brand new Chad, and I would say, don't worry about those things that are out of your control. Worry about that small little piece of the pie that you do have control over, and concentrate on that.
Thank you. Why would the Brainerd City Council select you or why should the Brainerd City Council select you as their next police chief?
That's always kind of a difficult question, but I think a good answer to that is a little bit what I said at the outset. It's really a prime place in my career for me to be. And I think if you look at the combination of the training and the experience and education and my variety of assignments, because boy, have I been lucky in my career. I consider myself so fortunate. And if you look at that and you say, this is a good investment in a good person, I think that is why the city council would say Chad would be the right hire for this position.
Thanks. And we are at our last question, which is, do you have any questions of us or of the city council?
I think my only question is, I have a lot answered throughout this process, and let me say right away that I sincerely appreciate the time that everybody has invested in this. But my only question, and maybe somebody could answer it, is what exactly is the council looking for in a police chief? Or is there some desirable quality or some desirable trait that the council really is shopping for?
Kevin? You have an opinion on that, Alderman Stunek?
Say that again, Gabe?
Do you have an opinion on that question?
I think community involvement and retention is a big thing, and I think we need to move forward with that. Our police department has been fantastic for many, many years. You've got big shoes to fill, but come and be you.
Yeah, I'd follow up with Kevin there. I agree with that. And we're not trying to make a change or any major changes to the police department. It is run effectively. It just happens that our police chief is retiring, so we need another police chief. So, a big challenge, as Kevin pointed out, is recruitment and retention, like agencies across the country are facing, and that'll be a focus of the new police chief.
Mr. Chair,
Jan?
I do have something to say. I'm sorry. I guess the other thing too, along with what Gabe and Kevin said, I guess I would like the new chief to be comfortable enough just to look and see how our community and how our police department has been running and what we've been doing without necessarily trying to change everything.
Thank you, Jan. Any other opinions from council members? Mayor Badeau? Have at it, Mayor.
What I'd like is that one of the things we've been very fortunate to have is with Corky, his interaction and his demeanor have really been a for us. We're not looking, or at least personally, I'm not looking for someone that's going to come in with an authoritative approach to policing. We're looking for community policing. We're looking for our police force to be a part of the community, be out there with its men. Mid-level city. That's one of the most important aspects.
Yeah. Well said, Mayor. Do you have any other questions of us, Chad?
No, I don't. I suspected that those would be some of the answers, and doing my back research and things like that was one of the reasons that I did apply for the position. And again, like I said, I sincerely thank you. I know it's very difficult with virtual meetings and interviews and things like that, but thank you again so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for showing up and for the interview, or for both of your interviews today, and thank you for your time, Chad.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. President, it looks like our last interview is at 4:50.
Okay, so we've got almost 10 minutes to refill our waters. It's the last interview. Can we change from water to beer now? I kid, Teresa. I'm not going to drink beer.
All right, I'll make a note of that.
Is it just on my end, or do people just randomly shuffle in order for you guys?
Yeah, mine just glitched. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jennifer and Kelly, just a heads up. I'm going up to Lake of the Woods this weekend, coming back Monday. I intend to be in town early afternoon and not miss the meeting, but if something bad happens, I may be a little late.
Thanks for the heads up. Are you fishing, Gabe?
Yeah, they got enough ice for portables, so
Nice.
gonna go catch a bunch of 14-inch walleyes.
Will you share?
Yeah, I think the limit's like 2 or something. But yeah, sure, I'll share.
Yeah, that would mean a bite. Gosh, 2? Wow.
Where are you going, Gabe?
I don't even know. This is my first year. My buddy's been going up there with his buddies for years, and somebody dropped out this year, so I'm taking the place. So this
Is
will
he
be a
going to
learning
Red?
experience for me.
Going to
Huh?
Red? Red Lake?
Lake of the Woods.
Lake of the Woods.
Yeah.
I think it is too. And you're right. You'll catch a ton of 14-inch walleyes. When you going up?
This weekend.
Like tomorrow, this weekend, or Saturday?
Like tomorrow, well, maybe Saturday.
All right. For the
I
day?
don't know. It's above my pay grade.
All right.
Whenever my brother shows up, I've got my fishing tackle ready to go.
Well, one of those things when the brother shows up.
Yeah.
My brother's always an hour late.
That's why I make my brother drive. I'm the one that's an hour late.
Yeah, okay.
David Pritchett. I just want to let you know I got the email done. Thank you.
You're welcome. There's longer versions of that too, but I just thought it was kind of funny.
Jen, you didn't get any more important messages from me while we were gone, did you?
It's about moving diamonds from Africa. And a free toast.
Okay, it's 4:50. Let's get this final interview of the day out of the way. Jennifer, take it over.
You got it. All right. Well, first of all, Victor, we'd like to thank you for taking the time to interview today with the City Council. Under normal circumstances, the City Council would be the one asking all of these questions, but since we're doing it virtually and we have a pretty tight time frame, I've been asked to ask the questions. So, but before we get to the questions, would like to take a moment to introduce our City Council. They're going to wave as I say that. So, first is Council President Gabe Johnson. Alderman Dave Pritchett, who is our Chair of Personnel and Finance. Kelly Bevins, who's the chair of our Safety and Public Works Committee, Alderman Tad Erickson, Alderwoman Jan Lambert, Alderman Kevin Stunick, and Mayor Dave Badeau. We also have our council member elects who are joining us for the interviews as well. That is council member elect Mike O'Day and council member elect Tiffany Stenglein. Absent is Alderman Wayne Erickson. He had a conflict and was not able to attend. And I'm Jennifer Bergman. I'm the city administrator. So we've scheduled 35 minutes for this interview, and we have 13 prepared questions for you, and just like to ask you to please be mindful of the time. So I don't lose track of time. I actually have set an alarm. So when we have 5 minutes left, I will let you know. So thank you for your patience and your cooperation with these virtual interviews.
Well, thank you for your patience. I know makes for a very long day, these types of interviews. So do you mind if I have a blank sheet of paper here in front of me. I'm just making sure that I answer every portion of the question if they're multi-point jot a quick note or two if that's okay. If not, I can set it aside. Okay.
All right. Well, our first question is, please tell us what interests you about this position and highlight key qualifications that make you the best person for the job.
Okay, certainly. So I'll start with my key qualifications. First of all, I've been in law enforcement for over 23 years. My entire life, I've taken jobs that have been both challenging as well as rewarding, and have provided opportunities for professional growth and development and leadership as well. Very young age, I was in the Army, and I was very, very early on in my Army career was leading troops. In fact, I was the youngest NCO in my company's modern day history. Obviously, World War II throws that all into whack. At any rate, so I'm 23-year law enforcement. I started out in policing in rural county, dealing with the constitutionalists, polygamists, loose horses, loose cattle, that sort of thing. I've done everything. I've touched everything, led or supervised in every aspect of policing throughout the 23 years. Currently, I'm a captain, a division commander over the investigations division, which has over about 150 personnel. 50 of those are non-sworn individuals, from our crime lab to our evidence unit, from homicide, other persons crimes, property crimes, narcotics, vice, and I'm also the commander of the SWAT unit currently. So I have a great breadth and depth of experience in policing, and I've had many opportunities to lead those units that I've been over to great success. I do have experience in each one of the requirements for the job, as well as for your desired qualifications. What interests me most about Brainerd is, well, I'll be honest with you. So my wife is from Minnesota, and we come to Minnesota quite often, and we've been trying to get there for us for the last 3 years. And she's kind of given me a little bit of not authority, but a little bit more say than I normally would have as to where in Minnesota that is. And recently we were visiting our daughter. She lives in Fort Ripley. She attends Central Lakes. She's pursuing her nursing degree like her mother, and works in the Essentia St. Joseph emergency room as a licensed practical nurse until she gets her registered nursing certifications. But so we were there visiting her, and we rented a cabin up there in up at Mayo Lake. And I looked at my wife that first morning. I was like, okay, this is where in Minnesota we're moving. But anyway, so since that time, I've gotten to know the area a little bit more. And Brainerd is it's got that great community feel. I really like the downtown area, the old downtown area. And it's just got that great feel, that great close-knit community feel. There's a lot of community events going, obviously not so many this year because of the pandemic, which put a stifle that to some extent. So yes, and we still have friends and family in the area. But at any rate, so I hope I've answered both those, and try to do so succinctly, given there's 12 more questions. Oh, another thing is in that effort to try to get to Minnesota, I've also successfully passed the Minnesota reciprocity exam, which makes me certifiable in the state of Minnesota as a peace officer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Please describe your leadership and management style and the strategies you would use to manage staff in the department.
Okay, first of all, my leadership style, it depends on the circumstance. For instances where there's urgency, critical incidents, like I've been the de facto operations section chief within our incident command structure, the National Incident Management System, since May 30th. We've had 270 incidents of civil unrest. We've had the vice presidential debates and stuff like that. So in those circumstances, it's very situational. It's strategic and tactical, but at the same time, I still delegate out tasks and trust those tasks to be done. I don't have to, fortunately, handle every aspect of a critical incident. I can delegate out those tasks. It's trust and trustworthy. But typically, I'm a servant leader. I'm more of a transformational leader. I like to gain consensus. I like to, when making a decision at the executive level, when making the decision, we have a little bit of time, fortunately. And I like to include those who the decision making process will most impact, the people that are actually out doing the work. I like to give them some input into the decision making process. And what that does, like I said, it generates that consensus building, and also instills kind of ownership of the issue. And when you have an officer, a detective, or a group of people, a team approaching something from a team perspective, when they get that ownership, it's golden. It is, obviously there's some direction to be given, commander's intent to be given, an overarching mission goals of the organization. But when that ownership takes hold of members of the team, great things happen. What was the other part of that question? I'm sorry.
I think you answered it. And the strategies that you would use to manage the staff in the department.
Oh, well, so yeah, I do take a team approach to things, but I think it's also important that, going into any organization or any unit within an organization, I think it's important that you start to establish that relationship of trust, and to do that, I think it's important to go where people work and get to know them one-on-one, see how they do their work, see where they do their work, what they need to do their work successfully, and how they can best serve the community, what equipment, what training, et cetera, that they may need. And with that, I probably should stop because we have.
Thank you. Please describe your experience related to community policing, and how would you bring that to the city of Brainerd?
Okay, so in one of my recent assignments, I was over the community outreach unit. And what the community outreach unit is exactly what it is. It reaches out to the community and makes arrangements for officers and for there to be a liaison and a relationship between the police department and the community. Shop with a cop, pay it forward, summer events, coffee with a cop, and stuff like that. And obviously, I think Brainerd has a lot of those good things going, and obviously I would continue with those things. I also like the Ask the Chief concept, where people from the community, the business community, perhaps groups like the Brainerd Northside Neighborhood Association, can actually have time with the chief of police and ask questions, express their concerns, build that relationship, and start working on co-policing strategies to solve those problems that are in the community. Some of the things that I've done in the past, when I was a division commander for one of our patrol divisions, I was geographically responsible for what's known as the West Side, which is economically depressed, predominantly minority area. And I went around to a lot of the business communities and made contacts with the managers of like the supermercado and struck up a relationship and helped them with some policing issues that they were having around their properties. And they were very grateful, and in fact threw a big luncheon for command staff and for members of the patrol division for helping them out. It was actually pretty great. Other things I've done is gone to the senior citizen day centers, and I had arrangement to go call bingo once a month with them and to serve lunch. But obviously with the pandemic, you can't do that. Everything's gone to virtual, which is unfortunate because, that's their only social outlet. But so those are the types of things. I think it's very important for the community to get to know the police leadership, as well as not just the chief, but all of the police leadership. And now the chief and the leadership can't always be there, because then that's who they want to talk to. But it's important also for them to be able to talk to the officers and build that relationship, and again get that ownership for the community problems. And then you see remarkable things start to happen in the community.
Thank you. What have you done to further your knowledge and understanding about diversity in a community? And how have you demonstrated your knowledge?
What have I done to increase my knowledge of diversity? And the second part of that, ma'am,
Was how have you demonstrated your knowledge?
okay, so I have sought training. There's a training called Arbinger that talks about getting outside of that outside thinking, external thinking from others' perspectives. We learned a lot about diversity and communications and developing relationships with people outside of our normal ourselves, outside our normal selves. You know, how we associate with people based on our experiences and our perceptions. And it talked quite a bit about that. I've also taken some courses. I attended the Northwestern University's School of Public Safety's School of Police Staff and Command College, and there was sections in that that also spoke to diversity. Now, how I've implemented that in my policing career and my personal life. I sit on the board. I sit on the board of trustees for the Catholic Community Services here in Salt Lake City. It's the largest charity that helps and deals with homelessness and homelessness issues, but it also with refugees and refugees issues. And so I bring some of my professional experience to that experience as well, and I'm able to give great input for that charity's efforts for that. And also, like similar to what I mentioned in the previous question, I've gone out to many of the minority businesses within the community that I was geographically responsible for, and made those inroads, made those relationships. I made myself available for them and or to them, and worked collaboratively on some of their issues, open air drug market outside their store, you know, harassing customers, transient issues, that kind of thing. So I've built those relationships within the community, and that's something I would continue to do.
Thank you. Can you describe a time when you made a mistake at work? How did you deal with the situation, and what was the outcome?
Well, you know, I believe in honesty and integrity above all things. And when I do make a mistake, I will admit to making that mistake. I'm not one to put it onto someone else or to try to cover it up. So when I was the division commander for one of our patrol divisions, actually I was the executive officer for one of our patrol divisions. And one of my responsibilities was to staff the various beats and the patrol zones according to calls for service, and days of the week where calls for service, the volume surged and whatnot. I staffed each of those beats, and I made a critical mistake in the implementation of putting out that bid. I put out the seniority roster and I put out all the available bids, but I didn't put out a time. I didn't put out a method of how officers were supposed to go on and log on, because again, it was, you know, during the pandemic, and we had to do it virtually. And I didn't test run the bid, and it bit me hard. It crashed. The officers didn't know what time they were supposed to bid. There was a lot of questions. As soon as I realized it, I was like, rookie mistake. So I made the appropriate contacts with our IT guy and with the person who's responsible for our bidding software, and I was able to rectify it. It was very embarrassing. We got off about a half day late, but that was my responsibility, and I took full account for it. So that's one example.
Thank you. Describe an experience where you've had to respond to and resolve a difficult and sensitive community member inquiry or complaint.
Okay, so currently I am the investigations commander for the division, and one of my units of responsibility is financial crimes. And one of our elected officials' campaign account was hacked and embezzled. We're at the end of that. I can talk about it now. It's no longer sensitive, but it was very, very sensitive because the suspect The main suspect was someone very near to the city. In fact, they were employed by the city. So it was an extremely sensitive investigation, and one that there were very few in the department that could know about it. The chief obviously was one of them, and the current mayor was the other one. But very sensitive. Detectives knew about it. It had to be. I had to make very sure and very clear to them that this was an extremely sensitive. Until we're done with the investigation and we actually screen charges, it couldn't be discussed. So I think that was a very sensitive community issue. I hope that answered both parts of the question.
Thank you. Describe any partnerships you have been a part of creating. How did building these types of relationships benefit the community or the organization you worked for?
Okay, sure. So I was I came back to the narcotics squad from an undercover capacity. Later in my career as the sergeant, I stood the unit up. I recreated the unit. It had been disassembled because they hit the wrong house. But at any rate, so I set up all the new policies, all the procedures. I selected the personnel, and then was hit with one of our major issues. We were having a huge issue with an open air drug market. So I started putting together the operational aspect of a major operation. We called it Operation Blue, and that involved calling in all these outside partnerships, outside agencies, assistance from the county jail, our counterparts at the county, their undercover unit, the district attorney's office, the city prosecutor's office, the legal defender's office, and a lot of non-governmental organizations. And the idea was to make a dent in the people who were experiencing homelessness and being victimized by all the crime and the criminality that's down there. In fact, they were hiding behind that homelessness to perpetrate their crimes. And so one of the first phases of this was to go in and identify individuals who might agree for some kind of a diversion program, treatment program, beds in a mental health program. But to do that, we had to identify those who had small warrants and stuff like that, stuff that we weren't going to put them in jail for, but we could actually use that to get them help. So after it was about a 3-month process to bring in all these outside organizations and to actually have communications with them, show them what the intent of the operation was. And in some cases, it was a negotiation. Okay, this is what we need. What can you do for us? We need some jail personnel there with jail transport, so that when we get into the phase where we're actually taking down all the drug dealers and the cartel individuals, that we have that aspect. And the legal defender's office, we had to negotiate with them as to what we were actually doing, because there was some initial resistance, because they're in the profession of being legal defenders or defenders in the court process. And so it was a very huge undertaking, but it was very successful. In fact, the commander that took over after me has dusted that off and are currently using it for a homeless abatement as the model for a homeless abatement program. So it greatly benefited not only the community, because it was a huge issue. People were afraid to go into this part of town because of the overwhelming level of criminality and oftentimes violent crime. And so I think those partnerships are great. Particularly, when you don't have the staffing to do all those things yourself, you need to reach out, and there needs to be those relationships, and you need to have regionalized, specialized services. And so I think that answers all of your question, I hope. Okay.
Thank you. So our next question is, describe a situation that you feel demonstrates your integrity and your ethical standards.
Okay, this is a short example so everyone can breathe a sigh of relief. I believe in honesty in all things, all aspects of my life, regardless of whether or not that's going to hurt me professionally or personally. I'll give you an example of that, I'm sorry, you asked for an example. I'll give you an example. I recently participated in a very competitive promotional process. And in that promotional process, there are several aspects. There's a presentation, an executive interview, a written product, seniority points get awarded, education points get awarded. And so at the end of that process, Human Resources will send to each individual participating in that process their score and where they ranked. But you won't know where the person above you or the person below you, you won't know what their score is or who ranks what. And historically and typically, the difference between number one and number two is tenths of a point. The difference between number one and the last person on the process or on the register are usually no more than 1 point. In that email, I discovered that they gave me too many points for my seniority. And knowing that it could very well cost me my promotion, I disclosed. I was like, hey, I think there's an issue with my seniority points, or the calculation of my seniority points. And the HR director quickly acknowledged, yes, that is indeed the case. I will get back to you. Fortunately for me, it was across the board, and everybody had the same award of points, so it didn't cost me. But it was the right thing to do. It was fair, and that's how I live my life. Integrity is how you manifest your morals and your values. So that's an example.
Thank you. If you are hired for this position and are still with the organization 5 years from now, how do you think the department will be different?
Well, I think that's a really good question, but I do think I'm really great at building relationships and at team building. And I think right now, I know that currently there's a little bit of a morale issue, given that the officers right now, there's a staffing issue right now. They're running three spots down. You've got 3 people or 2 people now, I guess one resigned, in FTO, so they're not fully contributing as solo police officers out in the field. And so there's a lot of work going on. These officers are putting in a lot of extra work. I also, the police right now are vilified. And so it's kind of hard environment to work in right now. I think that if I am still with this organization within 5 years, I think that we will have. So my focus, my goal would be to adequately and properly staff the department with qualified individuals, provide great quality training and good quality equipment to provide for their safety and for their abilities to interact and to work and to solve the community problems. You got to have safety, you got to have training, you got to have equipment to do that. But that's hard to say without actually coming and sitting down and looking at the overall culture of the department. I think that's to answer that question, I think I would first need to come in and I would first need to sit down with each individual officer, go where they work, ride along with them, see what their needs are, see where they are, see what 2 things they would change, 2 things they would keep the same. Same with the rest of the staff of the department, the non-swarm. And get that overall culture and atmosphere of the department. You can't start thinking about making changes until you actually see what needs to be changed. Change for the sake of change is never good. But I think given my track record for team building and for morale building and for relationship building, I think that in 5 years the department would be a thriving organization, fully staffed. And hopefully, given the right equipment and good training, that they can go out and serve the community the best they can, and build those relationships with the community. I think there would be a great relationship between the community and the department as well.
So kind of a nice segue into our next question, which is to discuss your philosophy and techniques relating to retention of law enforcement personnel.
Okay, so retention across the board is huge right now. Police are being vilified across the country and morale is down. We're being overworked. We've got a lot of civil unrest that we're having to spend extra time with those losses and retirements and resignations. Officers are having to work more. And so it's just compounding upon issue. So the key thing, so your officers are the best recruiting tool that a department has. If there's a culture inside that department if the overall morale and the attitude in the department is, hey, this is a great place to work. The community loves us. We love working for the community. We like getting out and interacting with the community. Our chief has our back. He supports us. He respects us. He hears us. He listens to us. They're going to say, hey, you should work where I work. This place is awesome. And you're going to get people coming in. Right now, I think that there's a great opportunity to take experienced officers from around the state and around the country who are leaving their organizations because they don't have that support, or they don't have the backing of their administration or of their community. And so I think first and foremost, if your employees are happy, sworn or non-sworn, they are your best recruiters, hands down. And you have to treat them with respect. They are part of the team. Officers and department staff make or break the organization. They do. There's no way around it. You can be the best leader in the entire world, but if you don't have that buy-in and you don't have the support of the officers and the staff, you're going to fail. Hands down, there's nothing you can do about that. So that's kind of my philosophy on retention. Is you got to make sure that it's an environment where the current officers and staff want to work, want to stay, and want to tell their friends, "Hey, this place is great." So I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to that. That's a really deep. You can really deeply dive into that question. But I'm not going to. We still have several questions left. I can talk about them for a while.
Actually, just so you know, we are down to 3 more questions. And so the next one is, if you could go back to when you were first thinking about police work as a career, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh, wow. That was many, many, many years ago. Remember why you're doing this. Remember why you're doing this. This profession is one of the, in my opinion, one of the best professions and one of the best fits for me and for my personality. I love to help people. In fact, my family, my parents instilled in us that service is one of the most noble things that you can do for humanity. I have 2 sisters who are teachers. My father was a teacher. He was also a career military officer at the end. I have 3 brothers who were in the military, and another brother, one of my other brothers, he's in law enforcement. And so we're all very service oriented. And that is why I do what I do. And I love doing it. I love being a benefit to the community. So I think, I'm a very positive person. I really have never had that dark moment in the night where I really considered getting out of policing. But I think if I were to go back, and this is what I tell one of my best friends, who's also a police officer, works with me. His son was thinking about it, and he sent his son to me to talk to me. And I said, I just remember why I got into this, and it's still true today. It's still valid today. I know it can be hard today, but it's worth it. It's worth it. At the end of the day, it's worth it. So.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Why should the Brainerd City Council select you as their next police chief?
Well, I think that I bring a breadth and depth of experience in policing. I've done pretty much everything that there is to do in policing in my current my Salt Lake City Police Department. I've had I've had a lot of opportunities for professional growth and to bring that and to give my officers and my subordinates that opportunity for professional growth and for opportunities for leadership. I've led numerous units and organizations within this organization, and I am currently leading one of the largest divisions, and some of which have the highest liability within the department. I have done all of the desired attributes and the required qualifications that you have listed for the job for chief of police, and through my career, I've continued to educate myself in best practices, both in leadership, best policing practices, best policing philosophies, community-oriented policing, and I am really good at looking at the way things are, looking at them, evaluating them, see if there are changes or tweaks that need to be made, and how to do so in the least to cause the least angst or upset the apple cart, if you will. I'm sorry, I'm at a loss for words here. But I've written many policies. I've revamped many policies. The current policy I'm working on is our IA policy. I'm streamlining that so we don't have things in the pipeline for so long, because that really affects officers' mental wellness and their well-being. I think I bring a lot of experience in policing to the table, and as I mentioned, I am great at building relationships, reaching across the table, reaching out to other resources, getting resources for organizations where they need, and making those connections with the community, making those connections with entities outside the organization, like the sheriff's office, the jail, or a women's shelter, or the homeless shelter, and stuff like that. I've got a lot of experience at leading troops. I've got a lot of experience at budgeting. I currently have an $18 million budget, $1.5 million in grants, and then a bunch of money coming in for billing for providing services to outside organizations like our crime lab. We provide crime lab services to a couple of the smaller cities just outside our borders. Yeah, I think I'm going to leave it with that.
Thanks. And our last question, just a couple of minutes left. Our last question for you is, do you have questions for us?
I know this is where I'm supposed to ask some questions. I know that civil service meets the 12th. When are you looking at making a selection for, I know that the three you're going to narrow it down to 3, and civil service is going to do that probably on the 12th. When are you looking at making a decision?
We'll probably have to talk to Gary to figure it out, but the way I see it is that we'll get the top 3 certified candidates from the civil service. And then at that point, the council will make the decision to extend a job offer or possibly a second round of interviews.
Okay. Next question, kind of probably right up your alley. I heard you talking about fishing. I came on a little bit early. I'm coming out on Christmas to visit my daughter and my son-in-law, and he's going to take me ice fishing. Where should I go?
Mille Lacs.
He's got a dark.
Depends
Mille Lacs?
what you want to catch
There we go.
and how much you want to keep.
If you
Mille
just
Lacs
want to
is
catch
pretty
good
hot, but
fish,
you can't
go to
keep a
Mille Lacs.
lot.
Oh yeah.
Go to Maury's.
Go to Maury's. That's the fish market.
store. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate your patience. I know this has been a really long day. Unfortunately, I don't, this is the time where normally I just go back over my resume, but you have that in front of you. I don't think that's necessary and would take more time. So thank you for your patience, and thank you for this opportunity. This is one of those opportunities. It's a very targeted opportunity. Like I said, the last time we came out, we rented a house up on Mayo Lake, and a week later, and I told my wife, this is where I want to live. Because this is when I think of Minnesota, this is kind of what I think about Minnesota. And about a week later, the announcement came out for the Brainerd chief of police, and I was ecstatic. And so I got on the phone with a daughter I have 2 daughters that live in Minnesota. The other 2 are going to school here, but one lives down in Forest Lake, and she was excited. And so it's one of those just perfect storm opportunities. So thank you for this opportunity to speak to you today and to continue on in this process. So that's really all I have.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us.
All right. Have a great weekend.
Yep. Take care. Stay safe.
Yep. Thank you. Bye.
Okay. 5:24. Finished a minute early. Gary, what's next for the city council?
Hello, councilors. Good to be with you here this evening. So what's next? The community panel representing the Civil Service Commission also interviewed candidates this afternoon. They finished up just a little bit ago. Those folks are going to be completing a evaluation form and forwarding that to me and Chris tomorrow. We will put a spreadsheet together for consideration by the Civil Service Commission that includes the results of the information from the panel, also a rating of education experience, and a short video interview that each of these candidates did previously. Not an interactive video like you did today, but something pre-recorded earlier. So that information will all be put together in a spreadsheet for the Civil Service Commission. They meet on Monday. I think it's at 11 o'clock, if I recall right, but it's on Monday. I know that. And from that discussion, that group is charged with certifying, is the term used. They will certify the top 3 candidates. For then that information will then be forwarded on to the city council for your consideration, I believe at your December 21st meeting. And then at that meeting, then it's up to you. If you're ready to move forward, you certainly would have that possibility. One thing I would say is we could talk about this probably with Corky a little bit beforehand. There may be some additional law enforcement specific backgrounding process that would need to be completed. So if the council did come to a conclusion on December 21st about a candidate, it's possible there would be some additional background that would be needed to get taken care of. So it might be like a conditional offer or something like that. So that'd be one way you could go. Second, it would be if you wanted to conduct another interview of a candidate or two, potentially in person. I say potentially because I don't know how realistic that is right now. Obviously, we're in difficult times from an interview standpoint doing it this way, but I can tell you just from my observation with that community panel earlier today, that went very well, and the technology worked for the most part very well. And your staff, especially Sean, helping us get to the point where we got in this process is greatly appreciated. So I'll stop. That's the process in a nutshell for the next steps.
Okay, Gary, I have one question. We got to meet all 7 candidates today. We don't make any decision on who the top 3 are. That's the Civil Service Commission. But we all met all 7, and we all have in our heads a top 1, 2, or 3. What happens if the Civil Service Commission gives us 3 people that none of us liked today when we met them?
Yeah, so that won't happen. No, Chris and I may want to do some research with the city attorney on that one between now and the council meeting. I mean, there's always the potential of something like that happening. I mean, quite frankly, I highly doubt it, but it could happen, and it does warrant research. I mean, you are ultimately the decision-making authority here. The commission is not. But again, I think that would probably require a little bit more legal research to get that researched.
Okay, it looks like Kevin has a question too.
It's not a question. I just totally concur and agree with what Gabe said. Every one of us, I'm sure, has got our top 3 right now. And I'd hate to see that go away, but I totally agree with what Gabe said. I think we need to have some ability to at least voice our opinion, or what was the purpose of us sitting here all day?
Yeah, my understanding is you had to interview all 7. That was what your legal counsel said was required of you. So I can get where that would be, slightly frustrating potentially, but that was a requirement of you based on legal analysis.
Well, I'm not against the whole 7 at all, Gary. I just say we may, if we totally different, which like you say probably won't happen, but it could happen. We should have a voice in what we do.
Agreed. You're the ultimate decision-making authority here.
Mayor Bedell.
So
Go for it, Chris.
Go for it, Chris.
And Chris, if you want to turn off your camera.
Okay, so I sometimes have internet issues, so that's why I turn off my camera. So part of our issue here is the city council has delegated part of your authority to the Civil Service Commission. So that is why we have to go through this process for the Civil Service Commission to do the hiring part. And then when working with our attorney, we wanted to make sure that we had everything done correctly as far as veterans preference law as well. So veterans preference law states that the final decision makers have to have an interview with the finalists. And our finalists were all 7. So that is why we had to do this. I apologize for the extra time. I really appreciate that you were able to do this and that we were able to comply with law, both our city charter and state law too.
Follow-up question on that, Chris. What if the city council's top 3 candidates are the 3 veterans and the Civil Service Commissions are not? How does that make us the final decision-making authority when the Civil Service Commission can eliminate the veterans?
So part of our scoring process is points for veterans. And when we did this, we had to get the points from the civil service process to you. So once they have the interview, the veterans preference points don't matter anymore.
Right.
So it's getting to the interview. That's what helps them when you're a veteran. So we have followed state law by having you interview all 7. That is why we had to do it. It doesn't matter who your finalist is from there. We just had to have the people that were selected as finalists interviewed by the final decision maker, and that's you.
I disagree with our attorney. If we all want one of the veterans and the Civil Service Commission doesn't put them forward, we didn't follow the spirit of state law. I'll say that at least. Mayor Bedell, you had a question or comment?
In terms of so the group is scoring them. It goes to the civil service. What happens at that meeting is there who is just going off of numbers and putting the 3 candidates forward.
Gary, do you want me to take that?
Yes, please.
Okay, the Civil Service Commission looks at numbers only. So they're going to see the numbers from the panelists. They're going to see the numbers from the T&E form and that video. They're going to we combine those numbers for them as staff. We present those numbers to them. They certify the results as far as what we come up with the total. And then they say, City Council, these are the top 3 people that you may look at for this position. That's the certifying of the top 3.
Mr.
Any
Chair.
other questions? Dave, you still have
I just want
something?
to make it on that. It feels as though some who the community when if they're making decisions going directly to them, and so is just verified. That's just
I agree with you.
I
They
should have
at least had
clarified.
residency requirements.
Well, I should have clarified that the Civil Service Commission told us who they created the process. They oversee the entire thing. They had told us who should be on that panel. And they had said it should be 2 police chiefs, it should be 2 community members, and then either Jennifer or a designee. The commission told us who they wanted that way.
Thank you, Chris. Jan, you have a question?
Yes, I do. So if I'm hearing it right, the Civil Service Commission, not one member was on that interviewing panel. Am I correct?
Correct. They usually are not.
Wow.
So
I don't, oh, wow. That's all I can say. Wow.
Gary?
So my recommendation is, Chris and Jennifer heard this already, is to fix this process for when and if you have to do it again. This is not the ideal process. This is going to work out fine. I think there's a little bit of angst right now, rightfully so, but it's gonna, I mean, I'm very confident it's gonna work out fine, but the time will come when I would suggest you look at your charter, you look at how you do this and make changes to it that more reflect what you want to do moving forward, rather than what's been in place historically, which is really what we're dealing with here. So I shouldn't editorialize like that, but you know.
Yep, that's all right. Any questions or comments, or are we good with 6 hours today?
Mr. Chair, Mr.
Only
Chair.
like 5. Jan?
No, I'm sorry. Is it okay? Is Corky still on? No?
He
Yes?
is still on. We're not supposed to talk about any of the candidates today, though.
No, no, I just want to thank Corky. I want to thank Corky that for his leadership on the police department and for the fact that we have such good reputation and for making it a very difficult decision for us upcoming. So I just want to say thank you, and I appreciated your leadership, and I appreciate the fact that our police department is well known that we were able to get this many qualified candidates. So thank you. That's all I want to say.
Well, thanks for those nice comments. And, believe it or not, part of my goal was to try and make sure that the department could attract good candidates. Knowing what I knew about internal people and maybe us not being in a position for a variety of reasons to not have an internal candidate, I wanted to make sure that I was doing everything I could that we would be able to attract good candidates. And I think we did.
Okay, well, I didn't call the meeting to order, but I'll do that right now. I'll call the meeting to order and then I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Lambert, second.
Motion by Pritchett,
Stony
second by
third.
Lambert to adjourn. We'll vote by roll call.
Yep, I'm getting there. All right, Pritchett,
Yes.
Bevins,
Yes.
and Tad Erickson had to leave. Lambert,
Yes.
Stunek,
It was a good day. Yes.
Johnson.
Yes, that motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.